forward, progress, make America great again. Yep, it's that special time that occurs once every 4 years that manages to give most Americans buyer's remorse. Presidential election year. With 2016 approaching and the news cycle is already filling up with campaign promises and debates from both parties, I thought it would be nice to clear up some things about the election and to give a perspective some people might not see but may agree with. First and foremost, I should reveal that even though I am a registered independent, I normally vote Democrat. Second, while the Republican clown card would be a very interesting thing to talk about today, I want to mainly address the Democratic Party, and for good reason. It all centers around what happened on April 30th, 2015, when Bernie Sanders officially announced he was seeking the Democratic nomination for President of the United States. As the New York Times summarized it on the day of his announcement, he is considered unlikely to mount a challenge to Clinton, but his positions on major issues could help push Hillary to address some of the concerns of more left-leaning voters. And the fact is, almost every major newspaper and media outlet, except for Huffington Post, shares pretty much the same view of him. Most of the media have already seemed to think that this race is over before it even begins. Sure, it does not help that outside Bernie, no other candidate, which includes Martin O'Malley, Jim Webb, or Joe Biden, has even registered much of a pulse with potential primary voters. Important to note that Biden has not declared his candidacy yet. However, the new polling data is showing him leading or in a statistical tie in primary states like New Hampshire, gaining ground in national polls, and his huge crowd attractions that, according to Washington Post, went over the 100,000 mark on combined stops in LA, Seattle, and Portland, proves that the New York Times and others may come to eat those words. This, of course, leads to the main point I want to talk about today: why Democrats should choose Bernie over Hillary. One of the big issues surrounding Bernie's candidacy, both with the media and voters, is most people do not know who he is and what he stands for, unlike with Hillary. To help with this, I thought I'd give a little background information about his political career and his viewpoints on some of the major issues currently affecting Americans. And I encourage you to look up the rest of the ones I don't speak about. Finally, I'll compare the one issue both Bernie and Hillary have revealed a plan for: college student debt, to glean some insight of how both of them might handle other issues affecting our country. The first thing I need you to know about is about Bernie's political background. Bernie's political career began a long time ago before he ever became a member of the Senate, included a healthy stint of student activism. According to TheTimes.com, Bernie was quite the activist during his stay at the University of Chicago in the early 1960s. He participated in several civil rights demonstrations and volunteered during his free time. This includes him being the leader of the Congress of Racial Equality, which was an NAACP ally at a time when most civil rights activists were black. He was also arrested for doing a sit-in to desegregate Chicago public schools, which he joked about. He said it was pretty easy to get arrested, as long as you put your mind to it. Bernie once walked around putting up flyers protesting police brutality. It took him a while to realize that the police car was following him and taking down every single one he put up. And they questioned him and yada yada yada, but nothing really nasty from that. He also made national news in 1962 when he led to a protest against the University of Chicago's administrative office to protest the university's housing policy on segregation. He thought it was weird that they'd have students come in that were both white and black but couldn't stay together. He also marched on Washington in 1963 for civil rights, for Martin Luther King's famous "I Have a Dream" speech. When he was not being an activist, he volunteered at the American Friends Service Committee, a Quaker-run service for helping people, where Bernie volunteered by helping to paint walls at apartments in a rough neighborhood in Chicago. I guess the whole point of this is underneath his gruff exterior that seems to always be on point with the issues, the man's a big softy and he cares about the underdog, even back then when he didn't really have to. According to Congress, Bernie has had a mixed bag of success and failure when it comes to running for public office. And when I mean Congress, I mean Congress.gov. He had 2 unsuccessful runs for Senate in 72 and 74 for Vermont, as well as 3 unsuccessful runs for governor of Vermont in 72, 76, and 86. And finally, he also had a failed run as 88 House of Representatives seat for Vermont. However, he did serve as the mayor of Burlington, Vermont from 1981 to 1989 as an independent. And he also served 16 years as an independent of the U.S. House of Representatives by way of Vermont from January 3rd, 1991 to January 3rd, 2007. And he's also served as an independent senator of Vermont since 2007. He also currently chairs the Committee on Veterans Affairs, which he's been trying hard to get some stuff for those veterans. Those guys need it. Not only does he possess experience, as his record shows, but he did not let early failure stop him from accomplishing what he sets out to do. And that's what we really need in a leader right now. Transition. Now that we know a little bit about Bernie's political background, it is time to share where he stands on the issues. Bernie's stance on many issues have been long held, and unlike Clinton's, have not changed with the wind. According to PBS.org, Bernie wants to limit corporate and interest groups' spending and campaigns by reversing Citizens United through a constitutional amendment. He also wants a single-payer health care system because he thinks Obamacare doesn't go far enough, not to mention it gives more power to the companies. Bernie also wants to charge companies for carbon emissions in order to incentivize them to lower carbon emission and use any money made from it to produce renewable energies. He also wants to raise taxes on the wealthy and cut taxes for the middle class and the poor, mostly with capital gains and dividends on the wealthy 2% of wealth owners, I should say. According to the New York Times, he supported Obama's 2004 executive action to shield millions of undocumented immigrants from deportation, but he also wants to limit the guest worker program. He claims it fuels unemployment for the youth by providing businesses with low-wage workers. He also opposed the Iraq War back when everybody was in fever going for it, and he also warned of Afghanistan becoming a quagmire, which was pretty much has to happen. He supports Obama's Iran deal and use of sanctions on Russia for the Ukraine debacle. He's a big advocate for diplomacy before war. He doesn't want to go to war unless it's the last resort. He also believes Saudi Arabia should be the one leading the charge against ISIS and not the U.S. And that makes sense. They have the resources, the manpower, and they're conveniently located. There's no reason they can't step up and do it. He supports raising the federal minimum wage to $10.10 an hour, but he called a $15 wage reasonable as long as it was implemented correctly. He wants to break up the 6 largest banks in the U.S., claiming they have too much power over the economy. He would also ban bank executives from serving on the board of the Federal Reserve, believing that doing so would eliminate conflicts of interest. Let's be honest. When you're regulating yourself, there's always going to be conflicts of interest. He also finally strongly opposed the TPP, believing it would be disastrous for American jobs like all previous trade agreements, which is pretty standard. While not all of his stance on the issues, it does give you enough picture that he's fighting for the middle class and poor and wants to make America the envy of the world again. He does not want us fighting in wars that are pointless or have no exit strategy. Now that I have informed you about his political career and where he stands on the issues, it's time to compare Bernie with Hillary. Using the one issue both Bernie and Hillary have released plans in detail to fix, college affordability and student debt, and with the help of truthout.org, I hope to showcase what the real difference between both candidates is. Implementation. After all, no matter how good your stance is on one of the issues, implementation is the key to success. And I'm going to start off by explaining both plans and then gleaning over how they compare. With Hillary's plan, she wants free community colleges, and students can attend a 4-year state university without taking out tuition loans. She would also lower the loan interest rates and cap repayment rates from reaching 10% of income. Pell Grants could be used for living expenses, and students would work 10 hours a week in work-study programs. She would also expand the American Opportunity Tax Credit, which is basically a tax credit for going to school that you can lower your taxes on. And she would have the states, or force the states to increase funding and to stop them from decreasing funding, and they must increase funding over time and continue to. The families are also asked to make realistic contributions, but during these tough times that can be a little hard. She wants to pay for it by closing tax loopholes and expenditures for high-income taxpayers. Now, Bernie's plan wants to eliminate tuition for 4-year public institutions for bachelor degrees, allow student loans to be refinanced at current rates, and lowers student loan interest rates to 2.32%, and cap interest rates at 8.25%. His plan would also explain the work-study programs throughout the country and simplify student aid applications, saying that the complications makes it hard for a lot of them to get through it sometimes, which they do, from personal experience. He would also forbid funding to be used for administrative salaries, non-academic buildings, or merit-based financial aid. States would also be required to reduce the number of adjunct faculty who are paid less than full-time employees and maintain funding levels for higher education and need-based financial aid. He would pay for it by instituting a tax on financial transactions, including stock trades, bonds, and derivatives, basically taxing Wall Street and the rich. Now, I would ask you, do you notice the difference? In Clinton's plan, there's not a whole lot of accountability for the schools on how they spend their money. Not to mention, she'd have to rewrite the entire tax code to make her payment plan a reality. And that's not just me saying, that's tax lawyers, political pundits, everybody would say that. There's so many loopholes in there that rich people would use to get around. Hillary would also have to contend with state governments who would battle her over increasing state funding for schools, which might not go over well. If you need an example, just look at Obamacare, with our current governor, Rick Scott, fighting over expanding that, even though it wouldn't cost him a penny to do it. Bernie's plan, however, does a marvelous job of making sure the money goes where it needs to, and avoiding the political game of seeming like you're doing something, but really creating more problems than it solves. After all, tax loopholes can be hard to close when your tax code is filled with them. His plan does a better job helping people now without bankrupting the government later on, and does a better job of forcing the states to play nice or face voter wrath at elections. After all, it doesn't force the states to redo their budget, just maintain the funding you're doing now, and nothing bad will happen. The best way to look at it is Bernie's plan tackles the problems of now with room for improvement down the line. Hillary's plan, on the other hand, is an all-or-nothing plan, which only works if everyone does the right thing, which everyone can tell you in this world is impossible to do because nobody can agree on everything, absolutely everything. I do know about y'all, but I want a plan that works and does not backfire later on. Okay, today we explored Bernie's political career and viewpoints on the major issues. We also explored a difference in policy plans between Bernie and Hillary on college student debt. And as previously stated, I was trying to convince Democrats to choose Bernie over Hillary. There are a lot of issues plaguing America right now, and it is vitally important we choose the right candidate or continue to face the wrath of bad choices, like our economy shrinking. We can choose someone to try something new and whose ideas are outside of the mainstream politics. We can take the chance and try to turn our country around. Or we can admit defeat and let the billionaires and corporations do what they want and resign to the fact we have no voice. Now, I should state for the record that I actually like Hillary Clinton and would vote for her in the general election. But based on the one plan showcased here today, there's a lot of holes in her philosophy, at least to me. To me, Bernie is the only chance we got if Democrats want to realistically change this country. And as long as everyone votes for him, we will get those changes. Of course, none of this will matter if nobody votes. So make sure your Democratic registration is up to date and vote in the next March's primary. Goodbye.